Hey, it's Eric. It's Ministry to Muslims. We are here weekly. Glad you joined us wherever you are around the world. We're here to give answers to equip Christians so that they can give light to the Muslims they encounter wherever they are. So we do this, like I said, weekly. If you're a friend of the ministry, you know what the fourth week of the month means. And if you're not a friend of the ministry, we invite you to just listen in, give it a fair watch, and let us know what you think. You can check with us at ministrytomuslims.com, ministrytomuslims.com. You can also check there for upcoming events that we have. And there's one coming up the end of May, May 31st to June 1st. Again, ministrytomuslims.com has all the information on that. Another one coming up also in September. So we have events on site and streaming. So you can either find us in person or keep watching wherever you are and keep getting trained so that you can give answers to the Muslims you encounter. Okay, so like I said, fourth Sunday of the month, we do Samuel Green, Reverend Samuel Green, coming to us from Australia. Welcome, Samuel.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Great to be with you and everyone else.
Awesome. All right. I want to remind everyone that Samuel also has a website called engagingwithislam.org. Is that correct?
That's right.
Engagingwithislam.org. So, and he's done a lot of debates. He's been doing this for decades. We really appreciate him. He's been doing a series, if you've been following us, on Surah Chapter 9. Surah Chapter 9. By the way, Samuel, what version have you been using? I know you put your screen share on the screen.
I think it's called a clear Quran. I don't want to.
You all might have your own versions of the Quran, and it's fine. Yeah. You can follow along with the screen or what you're using, and there may be a little bit of difference. So, anyway, we're gonna.
I got these notes from a website. I'm pretty sure it's called a clear Quran. I don't want to scroll down through my notes because I might lose my place for what I've set up today. I've sort of set things up, but I've just got an Islamic, a general Islamic translation that I'm working with.
All right. Okay. And then if you're in the chat, if you're watching, if you've got a question, please start it with the queue, and we'll take those if we can at the end of the broadcast. So, Samuel, we'll let you take it from here, and we're in Surah 9, about 50, yeah?
Yes. I'll give a general introduction again, and then we'll jump in. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at Surah 9 of the Quran. This is our third time of reading it. And again, the reason we're doing this is that we want to make sure that when we're engaging with Muslims, that we're not misrepresenting their scriptures. I get very frustrated when I see Muslims continually misrepresenting the Bible and not taking the time to understand, how it fits together, and it's, the giving of prophecies and the fulfillment of prophecies throughout, from the time of Moses up until Jesus. And so I get frustrated by that, and I don't want us as Christians to be doing the same thing with the Quran. And so if we're going to be engaging with Islam, then we want to make sure we engage with the Quran properly, because that's how we're going to make arguments that last. If you quote a verse out of context, and you might score a point there and then, but that argument's going to disappear in time because it'll be seen to be false. But if we can make sure that we accurately understand the Quran and we're quoting it in context, then the arguments that we make will actually stand the test of time, because they will be, in fact, what the Quran's saying. And so that's why I'm doing these series. Excuse me. That's why I'm doing these series. And we've done, Surah 33 and Surah, I think it's 61, and sections of Surah 5. And now we're doing Surah 9. Now, with understanding any of the Quran, what you need to know is its context. Because remember, the Quran is a book which does not provide its own context. What I mean by that is, it's what Muhammad said in response to events in his life. So the Quran is what Muhammad said in response to his life. But what those events are, what those events were, is not actually spelt out for you in the Quran. Sometimes you can pick up some ideas, but sometimes you can't. And so you need to understand what the context is from other books. And these other books are the Sirah literature, that is the biographies of Muhammad's life, and also from the Hadith literature, which provide us with this context. And so this is the first thing. We need to know something about Muhammad's life and when and where he said this part of the Quran. And when it comes to Surah 9 of the Quran, what's happened is that Muhammad has conquered Mecca. He's conquered Mecca, so the final major resistance in that part of Arabia has now been conquered by him, and he's now pushing up and beginning to attack the Roman and Persian empires. And so he's beginning to go into them. He's sort of attacking the frontiers of them first, and just pillaging the frontiers of those other empires. And so that's where we're up to. And so Surah 9 is all really about Muhammad's call to go and fight for him. And so in our first session, we saw that verses 1 to 28 of it were all about what to do with those Arabs who were not Muslim. But Muhammad's now got a big enough army. He's conquered Mecca. He's now basically, the man calling the shots in the Arabian Peninsula. But what about all the Arabs who haven't become Muslim yet? What happens to them? And so we saw that verses 1 to 28 were all about what to do with the Arabs who hadn't become Muslim yet. So for instance, they're not to come into Mecca, right? They're not to come into Mecca. They're unclean. And, there's all these things that are going to happen to these people. And basically, they're going to be forced to become Muslim after the time of their treaty has come to an end. So that's what happens in the first 28 verses. Then in verse 29, and I'll get up the screen now, please, Eric, if you can please share my notes. Thank you. So we'll just go back to verse 29. Verse 29 is where a new section starts. And this no longer is talking about the Arabs who are not Muslim. This is now talking about the rest of the world. This is talking about the Jews, the Christians, what's going to be the Romans, the Persians, all those people. This is now Muhammad's Great Commission. Just as Jesus has a Great Commission in Matthew 28, verse 9, so too Muhammad has a Great Commission. And we saw what that was. Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor forbid what Allah and his messenger have forbidden, nor practice the religion of truth from among the people of the book until they pay the jizya willingly or unwillingly. And we saw that the reason for fighting the Christians and the Jews is that they say, Jesus is the Son of God and Ezra is the Son of God. The Jews say Ezra is the Son of Allah, and the Christians say the Messiah is the Son of Allah. These are the statements of their mouths. They emulate the statements of those who blaspheme before them. And so we saw here that this is Muhammad's offensive conquest of the world. And it's not because the Christians had been fighting Muhammad. It's not a war of self-defense or anything like that. It's not saying fight them back because they fought you or anything like that. It's actually because they believe Jesus is the Son of God, which I do, which is standard Christian belief. Christians are to be conquered and subjugated. And so this is Muhammad's call to jihad. This is his call for his followers to now come and join him and to break out of the peninsula, and to go into the other regions of the world and to conquer them in the name of Islam. But what we then saw was that as we went through this, that not all the Muslims wanted to join Muhammad. They were sort of happy with conquering Arabia, but to go into the rest of the world, they're going, well, why do we want to go up there? That's going to be a lot of effort. It's going to be hard. We've got a lot of stuff down here now. Why do we need to go? And so from verses, where are we? From really verse 36, verse 34, Muhammad then starts giving reasons to answer the Muslims who don't want to go and join him on jihad. And so reasons come up of, we've got money already. And so it'll say, well, Allah's going to give you more money, or we're living in peace now. And then no, the real peace is paradise in heaven. It's all these types of reasons. And so Muhammad warns and really berates the Muslims who don't want to go on jihad. And in fact, he threatens them with hell. And he says that the way to forgiveness and to paradise is through joining him on jihad, and that if you don't, you're going to hell. So it was very firm, and I think it actually just continues. So it would seem that the largest section of Surah 9 is berating Muslims who don't join the jihad. So that's what comes after the introduction of this section. Remember, this section begins at verse 29 with the Great Commission, and then it just continues with answering all the reasons. So I can see another one here that people would say it's the sacred months, and during the sacred months we don't fight. And it says, well, the sacred months don't apply here in the same way they did before. And so he's answering all these questions of wealth, peace, the sacred months, all these things, and saying none of them are good reasons for not coming and fighting on the jihad. And so that's sort of where we're up to now, and we're in the midst of all this. So we're going to continue reading. Hopefully you've got a feel for where we're up to. And again, we're doing this because you need to understand the sections so that you can understand what Muhammad's saying in that section and quote it properly. And as we do this, we'll actually have better engagement with Muslims, and we'll have arguments which make their point much stronger. And I actually think that we'll have arguments, new arguments that we haven't seen before when we actually take the time to read the Quran carefully and in context. We're going to see things there that we may not have noticed before. Okay, so let's continue in verse 50. If something good happens to you, it upsets them. And if calamity befalls you, they say, look, our precautions in advance, we took our precautions in advance, and they depart happily. Now, again, this is talking about the Muslims who don't join those on jihad. And it says that for those Muslims who don't join you, when something good happens to the jihadists, they're upset. But when calamity happens to you, then they say, oh, well, we took precautions in advance, and that's why it didn't happen to us. So you can see he's dealing with this issue. Now, how is the jihadist to respond? Say, nothing will happen to us except what Allah has ordained for us. He is our protector. In Allah, let the faithful put their trust. Say, are you expecting for us anything other than the one of the two excellencies? As for us, we are expecting that Allah will afflict you with a punishment from himself or at our hands. So wait, we are waiting with you. Say, whether you spend willingly or unwillingly, it will not be accepted from you. Let me just do this. From you. You are an evil people. So you can see here that you've got the issue that is put forward, and that is the Muslims who aren't following Muhammad for the jihad have got their objection, and then the Muslims are given three responses. One, you can see this here, say. And so you can see that, this part of the Quran had its own immediate practical application, and that is respond with these words. Muhammad's telling them to respond. And what is it? The first one is Allah is our protector. And so whatever happens to us is part of his will. Now, I'm not sure what verse 52 means here. Are you expecting for us anything other than one of the two excellencies? I'm not sure what those two excellencies could be. That would be the type of thing you could look up in a commentary to find out. My guess would be it would be that the excellencies of having victory or the excellencies of paradise. That's what my general thoughts would be, because that's what we see elsewhere. But you see here, what's going to happen is that Allah will punish these Muslims himself, or at our hand. That is, the jihadists will come and punish those Muslims who are not joining Muhammad. Now, we saw that, didn't we, with the Islamic State? We see that with the Taliban. We see that with Muslim groups, that they would see from verses like this that it is their job to punish those Muslims who are not following the Quran. Say, whether you spend willingly or unwillingly, it will not be accepted from you. You are an evil people. So, if you're not right behind the mission and obeying Muhammad, then it doesn't really matter whether you spend willingly or unwillingly. Your money is not going to save you, basically. Your money is not going to save you. What prevents the acceptance of their contribution is nothing but the fact that they disbelieve in Allah and his messenger, and they do not approach the prayer except lazily, and that they do not spend except grudgingly. So you see what makes their acceptance, their work towards Allah and their money unacceptable? Because I guess what they're probably doing is they're saying, we won't go on the jihad, but we'll give money towards it. Okay, we won't go on the jihad, but we're going to give money towards it. But what we're being told is, what verse 54 says is, their money is prevented from being accepted because that they actually disbelieve in Allah and his messenger. So you can tell that it's talking about Muslims here because they're lazy in their prayers and they don't spend except grudgingly. And so, again, this is just continuing this theme, isn't it? It's a long extended rant against those Muslims who will not join Muhammad. Let neither their possessions nor their children impress you. Allah intends to torment them through them in this worldly life, and that their souls depart while they are disbelievers. So again, these are Muslims who are coming in prayer, but they're not saying their prayers properly. They're giving their money grudgingly towards the jihad. And verse 55 says, don't let the fact that they've got lots of possessions and they've got lots of children impress you, right? So you can imagine if you're a jihadist and you're giving up the things of this world to fight for Allah, then you might look at these other Muslims and go, well, I'd like to have all those possessions and slaves and everything else and all these children, but I don't. This verse is telling them to not envy them because, they're going to hell, basically. They swear by Allah that they are of you. You see, these people are claiming to be Muslim. They swear by Allah that they are of you, but they are not of you. They are a divisive people. Were they to find a shelter or a cave or a hideout, they would go to it rushing. And among them are those who criticize you in regard to charities. If they are given some of it, they become pleased. But if they are not given any, they grow resentful. If only they were content with what Allah and his messenger have given them and said, Allah is sufficient for us, Allah will give us of his bounty, so will his messenger. To Allah we eagerly turn. So you see here, you can see it's dealing with Muslims who are grumbling against Muhammad, They're not happy with the direction Muhammad's taking the Muslim community, and they're just being rebuked, aren't they? Right? So, they swear that they're of you. So they're saying, no, we're Muslim. But what type of Muslim are they? Well, they're not the right type of Muslim. They're critical of how the money is being spent. You see in verse 58, they criticize you in regard to charity. So they're not happy with how Muhammad's distributing the money. If they get some of the money, they're happy. But if they're not, they grow resentful. So you can see there's all this type of grumbling happening within the Muslim community. And these verses are meant to be addressing this. And I guess for Muslims today, they would be applying this to their own community. Certainly, radical groups like the Islamic State or the Taliban would be taking these verses and saying, it's our job to enforce the will of Allah on those hypocritical Muslims. And we actually saw that, didn't we, with the Islamic State, in that the Islamic State firstly killed a lot of Muslims, and these were Muslims that they understood to be not true Muslims, even though those people would say they are. They weren't understood that way, and so they were punished. Allah was punishing them by their hand. So that's what we see. Now, verse 60 is an important one because it tells us what the charities are for. Now, the word charity is zakat. And hopefully, if you've done a bit of work in Islam, you would have heard of the zakat. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Remember that the 5 pillars of Islam are the confession of faith, the feasting and fasting during Ramadan, the 5 daily prayers, the pilgrimage to Mecca, and the zakat. Now, you can see how the word zakat here, and this is the word in verse 60, this word zakat, it's been translated as charity. And this is what we often hear. I'm sure you've heard Muslim leaders say, the money given in charity, the money given in charity. Now, this is reading through the Quran like this is great because this is where we get to see the Quran explain itself and explain what it means by zakat, what it means. And I want to say charity is not the right word to use. I would translate it as simply money to Islamic causes. Right? Money to Islamic causes. Because what does charity mean? Charity means giving money to the poor. That's what we think by the word charity. But let's have a look at who the zakat is for. Okay? The zakat is for the poor. Well, that's fine, the poor Muslims, and for the destitute. Okay? So it's for the poor and the destitute Muslims, and those who administer them. So the people who gather the zakat and are distributing it, well, then they need to be paid. So it's used for administration as well. It's also for reconciling hearts. Reconciling hearts. Now, what does reconciling hearts mean? Well, that's got nothing to do with the poor and the destitute. That has to do with 2 groups of Muslims who may have had animosity between each other, and then this money is being used to make everyone happy, like a blood money type of thing, where you pay a certain amount of money to cover an offence. And so the money is to be used to bring about peace within the Muslim community, to give money to those who feel that they've been hard done by. And for freeing the slaves. Okay, so that's sort of helping the poor. You can use the money to help free slaves. And for those in debt, so if there are people in debt, you can help get them out of debt. I mean, that would, I guess, come under the category of charity. But what about this one? And in the path of Allah. and in the path of Allah. Well, that phrase, in the path of Allah, has been used throughout this chapter, and it means fighting. It means going on jihad. We've just seen this phrase, in the path of Allah, on many occasions. And so you see here that the zakat is also to be used to finance the jihad. And if you do a quick Google search, you'll see examples of this where Islamic charity organizations in Western countries have got into trouble for using money collected from the Muslim community in the zakat, but they've used it to support jihadists, and they've got in trouble for this. And this is something that we just need to understand, that the word charity does not translate the word zakat. That's what I'm trying to make here. That's the point I'm trying to make. The charity is not a translation of the word zakat. Zakat is better translated by the phrase Islamic causes. Islamic causes. And that can be helping the poor, helping the destitute, doing the administration of it, bringing peace between different groups, freeing slaves, helping those in debt, but also financing those on jihad. And then he finishes up by saying, and the traveler in need. And so that might be, someone on pilgrimage. And so you can use the money collected to help those people. But this is an obligation from Allah. So you've got to do this zakat. Allah is all knowing and all wise. So he knows what you're doing. So I think that that's a really good verse to remember. We've looked at a number of other verses so far. And, the last 20 or 30 verses have really been Muhammad saying, if you don't join me, you're going to hell, and here are all the reasons that you give, and none of them are valid. And so you probably don't need to remember all of those verses. You just need to remember the general theme of what's happening. But Surah 9, verse 60 is an important one, because we often hear the zakat come up, and here is your definition that you can bring up accurately to show what it means. And if someone says it's charity, you can go to this verse and show, well, that's not what it's about. It's far more than that. It also includes financing the jihad. Now, let's keep going in verse 61. And among them are those who insult the prophet and say, he is all ears. Say, he listens for your own good. He believes in Allah and trusts the believers, and is mercy for those of you who believe. Those who insult the messenger will have a painful penalty. Well, there's plenty that we can do there. Again, these are people. This is interesting, isn't it? That there are early Muslims who are not happy with Muhammad. They're not happy with his decisions. This is historically important, because we often get the impression from our Muslim friends or historians that Muhammad united the Arabian Peninsula and everyone was behind him and everyone agreed with Muhammad, and that it was obvious that he was the prophet of Allah and that everyone's in obedience to him. But when we come here, we see that people insult Muhammad. They say he's all ears. I'm not sure what they mean by just all ears. It might be that he just listens but does nothing. That's probably what it means. But we're told here what's happened. If you insult the messenger, you will have a painful penalty. And so you can see that, one, not everyone's happy with Muhammad, but two, Muhammad's making it clear that if you insult him, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. They swear to you by Allah to please you, but it is more proper for them to please Allah and his messenger if they were believers. Now, again, this is interesting, isn't it? Because they're happy to swear by God. I swear by God that I'll do something. But this is saying that's not enough. It's not enough just to swear by God. You have to please Allah and his messenger. So these people are saying, we believe in the one God. We're just not happy with Muhammad. And verse 62 is saying, well, that's not good enough. You can't insult him. You can't think that you can please God without pleasing Muhammad. You must please Muhammad. Muhammad and God are now joined together. Verse 63, do they not know that whoever opposes Allah and his messenger will have the fire of hell abiding in it forever? That is the supreme disgrace. So again, this is not addressing Christians or Jews or polytheists. This is addressing Muslims. This is addressing the early converts of Islam. And it's saying that if they oppose Allah and Muhammad, that they're going to hell. The hypocrites worry lest a chapter may be revealed about them, informing them of what is in their hearts. Say, go on mocking. Allah will bring out what you fear. If you ask them, they will say, we were just joking and playing. Say, were you making jokes about Allah and his revelations and his messenger? Do not apologize. You have disbelieved after your belief. So again, you can see it's all to do with Muslims. If we pardon some of you, we will punish others because they are guilty. So let's just look at those sections there. Again, you can see that this is all dealing with dissent in the early Muslim community. And people who are not happy, I mean, I keep saying the same things over and over, don't I? Where are we? The hypocrites are worried lest there will be a chapter of the Quran revealed about them, saying what's in their hearts. Well, in many ways, we've already had a lot of that, haven't we? It's already been, Muhammad's already been saying what's in their hearts and what's going to happen to them. So that has already started. You've got the typical response that some people might say, oh, we were just joking, we were playing. People say that, don't they, when they say something and they realize they might get punished for it. And so they're saying, well, we were just joking. And then he says, do not apologize. You have disbelieved after your belief. So that they're being counted as apostates in many ways. You've disbelieved after your belief. If we pardon some of you, we will punish others because they are guilty. So really, for those who have insulted Muhammad, clear in their commitment to Muhammad, then even their apology is, it may be accepted, it may not. It may be accepted, it may not. And so Allah's just saying there that, he might punish some of you, he might pardon some of you. You don't really know what's going to happen. But that would be an interesting verse, I think, to think about the topic of apostasy in Islam, because it talks about those who have disbelieved after their belief. And so this would be one of the verses. There's not many in the Quran which talk about apostasy, but that's how these people are being spoken about here. Verse 67, the hypocrite men and hypocrite women are of one another. They advocate evil and prohibit righteousness and withhold their hands. They forgot Allah, so he forgot them. The hypocrites are sinners. Allah has promised the hypocrite men and the hypocrite women and the disbelievers the fire of hell, abiding therein forever. Curse them. They will have a lasting punishment. Like those before you, they were more powerful than you and had more wealth and children. They enjoyed their share, and you enjoyed your share, as those before you enjoyed their share. And you indulged as they indulged. It is they whose works will fail in this world and in the hereafter. It is they who are the losers. So again, it's just talking here about the hypocrites. So again, Jews and Christians, they're not hypocrites because they don't accept Muhammad. The hypocrites are again Muslims. So you can see we're up to almost 40 verses here. 40 verses of Muhammad just hammering the Muslims who will not join him and do what he says. And, the promise for them is the fire of hell. Allah is going to curse them. And again, you can see how this must affect the Muslim mind, right? In the Muslim mind, there is this idea that there are the true believers and there's the hypocrites. Okay, there's the true believers and the hypocrites. And of course, this is going to inevitably lead different Muslim groups to say, I'm the true believer and you're the hypocrite. And then once they make that decision and are convinced of it, then the commands that Muhammad has given in these verses are going to apply to the true believer and what they are to do to the hypocrite. Let's continue to move on. Things change a little bit here in that Muhammad now gives some illustrations from the biblical stories. Remember that the Quran assumes that you know the Bible. This is one thing, if you're a Muslim watching, that you need to understand, that the Quran assumes you know the biblical stories. The Quran just gives very brief retelling of these stories, and on many occasions you can't even understand the story unless you know the biblical story first. But he now moves on to tell these biblical stories, and I assume they're going to be, as I think we'll see, that they're going to illustrate these hypocrites. So let's look at verse 70. Have they not heard the stories of those before them, the people of Noah and Ad and Thamud, and the people of Abraham and the inhabitants of Medina and the overturned cities? Their messengers came to them with clear proofs. Allah never wronged them, but they used to wrong their own selves. So he doesn't really give any details of these earlier people, but you can see here, have they not heard the stories of those before him? See how it just assumes that you know these other stories? So the Quran is not claiming to give you all this information. It's assuming that you know it. Muhammad's given some of the information before, but as we would know, to really understand these stories, you need to know the Bible. The Bible has the original story of the prophet. The Bible has the complete story of the prophet. And if you want to understand what Muhammad's referring to here, you need to read the original prophet, which is in the Bible. And so these earlier stories of Noah, Ad, and Thamud, and Abraham, the cities that were overturned, probably talking about Sodom and Gomorrah there. These are all meant to show, God did this in the past. God did this in the past. And so that's what he's going to do to these hypocrites. Now, he moves on, verse 71. The believing men and believing women are friends of one another. They advocate virtue, forbid evil, perform the prayers, practice charity, and that'd be interesting to see if that word is charity or zakat, and obey Allah and his messenger. These Allah will have mercy on. Allah is noble and wise. Allah promises the believers, men and women, gardens beneath which rivers flow, abiding therein forever, and fine homes in the gardens of evil. But approval from Allah is even greater. That is the supreme achievement. So we now have the second group spelt out here, and that is of the believing men and women and what's going to happen to them. And what we're told is that the believing men and women are advocates of virtue. They have the proper morality that is required. They forbid evil, they do the prayers, they practice the zakat, they're obedient to Allah and his messenger. And notice what's going to happen. Allah will have mercy on them. Allah will have mercy on them. So these are the people who earn Allah's mercy. And Allah promises the believers, men and women, gardens beneath which rivers flow, and fine gardens and Allah's approval. So you can see that it's the true believers who get the blessings of paradise. But notice who the true believers are. These are the ones who are joining Muhammad on the jihad. So those who don't join him, they're going to hell. But the promise of paradise, the promise of mercy, right? So mercy, forgiveness. Who gets that? Well, it's not the hypocrite. It's not the person who just says they're a Muslim. It's those who are joining Muhammad. Now, look at verse 73. O prophet, strive against the disbelievers and the hypocrites, and be stern with them. Their abode is hell. What a miserable destination. Now, my feeling is that by the time you get to verse 73, Muhammad's really worked himself up into a frenzy. You know, from verse 29, we saw that he was calling people to come out and fight with him. He was calling people to come out and fight with him. And there have been people who won't do that, others who will. And he's been rebuking those who won't. And now, you know, he's really worked up. He's really worked up. And what does he say? Strive against the disbelievers and the hypocrites. Now, this word strive is jihad. Right? So this is one thing you need to realize. And verse 73 is an important verse to remember in your understanding of jihad, that jihad is against Muslims. Right? Jihad is against hypocritical Muslims. That is those who won't obey Muhammad and his messenger, who still say they're Muslim, but, you know, they're not practicing the faith in the way that they should. And so we have this command to strive against them, to jihad against them, and to be stern with them. Their abode is hell. What a miserable destination. So again, you can see how if you were to see yourself as the true Muslim, this would be a command that you would see that you need to put into practice at some time. And of course, this is precisely what we've seen the Taliban and the Islamic State and those types of groups. This is what we've seen them do. Let's continue. And then I might finish up in a moment. They swear by Allah that they said nothing, but they did utter the word of blasphemy, and they renounced faith after their submission, and they plotted what they could not attain. They were resentful only because Allah and his messenger have enriched them out of his grace. If they repent, it would be best for them. But if they turn away, Allah will inflict them with a painful punishment in this life and in the hereafter. And they will have on earth no protector and no savior. So again, it's berating those who have been opposed to Muhammad. And it's saying that they're blasphemers, that they've renounced the faith. Again, that this would be another important verse for looking at the concept of apostasy and what constitutes apostasy. So, I mean, what we're seeing here is that renouncing the faith is not just becoming a Christian. Okay, notice what we're seeing here. It's not that you've renounced the faith because you've become a Muslim you've become a Christian or a Jew. Right? So it's not that if a Muslim takes on a different religion that makes them an apostate. we've seen in these verses that you are counted as an unbeliever or having left the faith or renounced the faith just by not following Muhammad correctly. So that's very important to understand what apostasy is in Islam, because we might have our own questions. We might think apostasy is just becoming a Christian, for a Muslim just to become a Christian. The subject's much bigger than that. And I think, as Christians, if we want to talk about apostasy, we need to look at all of the verses on this. And this is an excellent verse for gathering that up. Where are we? Look, it's 1:45. I think we will finish up there. And that gives us a bit of time to have a chat, Eric. And I've been plowing through this, and it's pretty hard stuff to read through because it's all on the one theme, and it's this real berating. So I think we will put this. Let me just write a little note in my notes for next time.
That was a good chunk. That was a good chunk of material there. I think we can live with that. And I don't see questions in the chat, but I have a few of my own, and we can pause and maybe see if we.
And it's not easy stuff to ask questions about. I mean, I've tried to apply it en route, but he's really berating them. So
yeah. Okay, so in verse 55, it seems that Allah wills that the disbelievers have their souls depart from them while they're alive. Now that seems like a concept foreign to the Bible. And it seems ruthless. And then a few verses later, verse 66, some are pardoned. Okay, so on what basis are they pardoned where at the same time he desires that their souls depart from them?
Yeah, let me just read those verses. So, let neither their possessions nor their children impress you. Allah intends to torment them through them in this world, and that their souls depart while they are disbelievers. So I think what that's saying is, that they die while in disbelief. And so that this is, obviously a dreadful thing to die as an unbeliever. That'd be the same in Christianity, to die as an unbeliever. And so this is the warning that Muhammad's giving them, that, you're going to die as an unbeliever. What was the other one? You said
it a little differently.
Okay, well, what were you thinking there?
Well, it says, so I'm just reading my version in 55.
Sure.
Allah intends by those things only to punish them in the life of this world, and that their souls will pass away while they are unbelievers. Okay, so I see. Now I see what you're saying. It seems to me, as I was, the surface reading seems to be while they're still living.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That this is actually a major theme in the Quran, where the Quran says you've got to believe in Muhammad before you die, and that you can't do it after you die. And we have a similar idea in Christianity, and this is an idea that comes up on many occasions. I've got a list of them in my Quran. I've collected them up, but I'm not going to go through it now. But that's the idea, that Allah's punishment is that you will die an unbeliever. And of course, we know what that means.
Okay, so now in verse 63, if you ask Muslims, they'll tell you shirk, or associating partners with God, is well, here I'm going to use this term supreme disgrace, but here in verse 63, the supreme disgrace is simply opposing Allah and Muhammad. So
that is an interesting pickup. Yeah, it'd be great to see if the supreme disgrace of idolatry is spoken of elsewhere, and then it's here as well. Yeah.
So now, and this overarching concept in this passage is about jihad, and so would that be, of course, probably your average Muslim is going to, like you say, oh no, this is about defense positioning and war and that kind of thing, but you're saying it's more offensive, it's more like you said, jihad. So what do the Muslim scholars say about this? Are there any that would side with the view that you presented?
Oh, that they would absolutely side with me. I mean, I'm, you know, when I started this series in Surah 9, I referred to The Reliance of the Traveller, which is one of your standard books of Sharia. And in the sections on jihad, it quotes at length Surah 9 and talks about how this sets the paradigm for Muslims attacking Christians and taking over Christians and conquering the Christian world. And so, it's explicit in what it says. Yeah. Well, I don't know. All I can say is it's in the Sharia. I'm not going to go read all that now, but I brought that up in an earlier one.
Fair enough. Yeah. Now, along the same lines as the previous point I was making, in verse 71, it seems like there's a different prescription for, receiving God's grace than what we typically hear from Muslims again, and which is, well, if the majority of your deeds are good, then you're going right. You get paradise. But here it says, just if you do your prayers and you do this and you do that, and you're saying, well, do the jihad too. Well, then that's the prescription. So it seems like where are they getting the part about the majority of your works being good gets you there?
Yeah. Look, to answer that, we need to know that there are different ways of being saved in Islam. So the Quran puts forward different ways. See, in Christianity, we are unable to save ourselves. And this is the message of all the prophets. We're unable to save ourselves. And so God saves us, and we look to that one act of God, with the Lord Jesus living the righteous life, dying the righteous death, and being raised to life. That is the one thing that we look at, that we look to. In Islam, there is no act of God to save you. There is no act of God. And so you have to earn it yourself, but you can earn it in all different ways. And so in the Quran, the jihadist martyr goes directly to paradise. And all Muslims know this. The martyr goes straight to paradise. Their soul is taken up straight to paradise. For everyone else, if you don't die as a martyr, you go to the grave first. Your soul goes to the grave. And then in the grave, you'll be asked 3 questions. Can I remember the questions? Who is your prophet? Who is God? Who is your prophet? And something else. I can't remember the last one now. But you're asked these questions in the grave. And then on the day of resurrection, you will be taken to the mouth of the grave, the mouth of hell. And so even Muslims are taken to hell, and they all sort of stand around the mouth of hell. And then those whom Allah wills, he takes away from hell. And then those whom he doesn't will stay there. So my point is, within the Quran, there are different ways of going into paradise. There's the jihadist martyr. There's the true believer who fights, on jihad. There's those who, don't fight on jihad but are still Muslim. They have a different path. Yes, there are different ways.
All right. I don't think there are any other. Let's see. There's a statement. I don't see. Well, okay. Here we go. What was the reference early about the 2 excellences? Do you know what that was referring to? Thank you.
Yes. No, I don't. But I can find out. So I'm just trying to find where the excellences was.
I think mine said two good things or two good something.
Okay, verse 52. Verse 52. Say, are you expecting for us anything other than one of the two excellences? As for us, we are expecting that Allah will afflict you with punishment from himself. Now, it doesn't say in the context, okay? So, we would have to look elsewhere around the Quran to see what it says. The Hadith might give us some type of early Muslim interpretation of what it meant. But, that's a little type of project you can do. And so when you read the Quran, from knowing the general context, you can understand most of it. But every now and then you'll get a verse where you go, I wonder what that is, and you can look it up. You could look it up in some tafsir material, in some of their commentaries.
Okay, I think that's going to do it. So again, if you're watching, this has been the third of at least 4 parts on a study on Surah 9. And Samuel Green is just gracious as always. Join us, train us, and equip us to help the Muslims better understand their own book. And so pretty plain, a lot of this that
it is. It's very it's straightforward.
Yeah. Thank you again, and Samuel, and thank you, audience. We hope to see you back next week, and then we'll see you back next month, Samuel, to continue this series, Surah 9. Thank you so much.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
God bless you.